We all have had the bio of Roz, but I can't help but pointing out just a few things. Founded the Colorado Coalition for Genocide Awareness and Action in 2006, now referred to as the Coalition Against Global Genocide. She's previously served as a volunteer. She's been involved with, in a political level with Ken Salazar, Patricia Schroeder, and the executive director of the Colorado chapter of the American Jewish Committee, the Holocaust Awareness Institute at the University of Denver, and the founder and director of the first regional office of the American Israel Friendship League. It goes on quite extensive. I'm sure you've all had it. If not, please let me know and I will get it to you, because she also has quite a long list of awards. I'm very anxious to hear from our special speaker this evening. Good evening, Roz.
Well, thank you, and welcome everybody. And I will be I'm going to be reading most of my remarks so I get everything in quickly. I want to thank Jim and members of the Rotary District 5450 for inviting me this evening to speak about world peace and understanding genocide, which gives me the opportunity to tell you more about the organization that I started many years ago. It was then called the Colorado Coalition for Genocide Awareness and Action, and now we're called the Coalition Against Global Genocide, or COAG, as most people call us. I will begin with world peace. When I first got a call from Jim about this, I thought it was just going to be about the organization, and that's easy. But when I was told about, I received an email from him asking about how do you build peace, and there was just no way. I just had to give it so much thought, and I have given it a lot of thought. So we'll begin with that. And my question to all of you is, I don't think you will, maybe afterwards we could talk more about it, because I'd like to hear more of your response to the part of the peace. And do you think we will ever see peace? And I have worked at trying to create peace in this world for as long as I can remember during my many years of activism. In fact, our former chair of COAG sent me a card some time ago that read, "She keeps pushing the world, even though the world doesn't want to budge." And that was amazing. And so I'm here to tell you that as a founder and director of an organization such as the Coalition, I am totally convinced, forgive me, but I am convinced that we may never see peace, at least not in my lifetime. It means that instead of it seems that instead of moving forward, we keep going backward with accelerated hatred and violence. Yes, we may have made some progress, but we're definitely not able to say we have won. Peace has been established worldwide. So let us take a moment and look at the definition of peace. According to the dictionary, peace is defined as the absence of war and other hostilities, an agreement of a treaty to end hostilities, freedom from quarrels and disagreements, harmonious relations, public security and order, inner contentment and serenity, and it's used as a greeting or farewell and a request for silence. All these definitions are what every normal human being hopes to dreams about. In fact, it is so important to so many people that in 1981, the United Nations General Assembly declared International Day of Peace every year on the third Tuesday of September, with the purpose of strengthening the idea of peace across the world. Unfortunately, there are way too many people in this world who do not have such dreams. And so, as I stated before, I really do not think we will ever see world peace. But, and this is really where I turn. But what I strongly believe is that we must never, ever give up working towards creating peace. We must never, ever give up trying to create a kinder and more gentle world, a more peaceful world. For if we give up, architects of evil will have won and will continue to practice their despicable trade. How fortunate we are, how fortunate we all are to have organizations and people in this world who believe that someday we may see peace in this world. People such as Margaret Mead, whose quote says, and I have it right here on my board, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." And people such as John Lennon, whose beautiful song, Imagine, which debuted in 1971 and touched a raw nerve. 45 years later, the lyrics continue to tug at our hearts as we experience mass killings, racial incidents, crimes against humanity, and genocides that just never end. And people like, and I'm going to mess her name up, I'm sure, but she's the beautiful Pakistani activist who spoke out for female education, and the 2014 Nobel Peace Prize laureate who was quoted as saying, "I truly believe the only way we can create global peace is through not only educating our minds, but educating our hearts and our souls." As I mentioned before, we have many organizations today who are working to reach this goal of building peace. When I founded COED, I felt that in a very small way, we would become a piece of a very large puzzle. We would be a piece, P-I-E-C-E, for peace, P-E-A-C-E. And so COED was created. As we go into the subject now of understanding genocide, I will address the following. One, why must individuals be aware of what is happening in our world? Two, why the Coalition Against Global Genocide was created? Our mission, our goals, and our programs. And what can you and must do to help stop genocides and crimes against humanity? So we'll start with the first. Why individuals, why people must be aware of what is happening in our world around us. On April 24th, 1915, under the cover of World War I, the Young Turk government of the Ottoman Empire began a systematic genocide of its Armenian citizens. 1.5 million Armenians were exterminated through direct killing, starvation, torture, and forced death marches. And because there were no outcries from people around the world, the Armenian genocide encouraged Adolf Hitler to go ahead with his own plans to exterminate the Jewish nation, resulting in massacring 6 million Jews and 4 million other innocent people. Just recently, and it took so many years, the Armenian communities worldwide have been fighting for this because it was never proclaimed a genocide. And just, I believe, a year ago or so, it was finally recognized and proclaimed as a genocide. So I learned about the Holocaust at a very young age through survivors when speaking to my father, who was a rabbi in a synagogue in New Jersey. These survivors couldn't speak much at that time, and it was many of them met with my father in his office, but many of them came to our home, and I listened, and even as a young age, I listened and I seemed to understand what they were saying. The common thread that ran through what they were telling my dad, again, it wasn't much in those years, was that no one was there to help them. I will never forget their words of hopelessness. Today, we know that people knew what was happening in Europe, but no one did anything to help them. And the question again is always why, why? As I grew older and through these many years, I befriended survivors of the Holocaust who began speaking more and more. Hearing their stories of survival, I realized three miracles had happened. One, people did survive the concentration camps, the labor camps, the death marches, and other horrible atrocities. How? I really don't know after talking with them. Not all, but many of them were able to build their lives. And the last thing was that another miracle, one would think that after what they went through, they would lose their faith and let go of their religion and their belief in God. So many of these survivors, again, not all, stayed strong and continued to be connected to their faith. And I have so many stories about so many of them, that what they did in concentration camps and after they came out. Many years after the Holocaust, citizens of the world and governmental officials pledged never again. Never again would a civilized society ignore the cries of human suffering, and never again would we turn a blind eye to atrocities against humanity. Two questions were asked. What did we learn from the Holocaust? And how can we use the Holocaust as a vehicle to end hatred and make sure that such atrocities would never happen again? The answer, sadly, is that humanity has not learned one thing from history, and the words never again mean absolutely nothing. Man keeps on killing, and the majority of people still remain quiet and uncaring. Since the Holocaust, we have watched genocide and crimes against humanity unfold again and again. Never again has become yet again. And I'm sure you all, just to name a few, Cambodia, between 1975 and 1979, Bosnia, 1992, 1995, Congo. Over the last 2 decades, more than 5 million civilians have died in the Democratic Republic of the Congo in a succession of complex wars and conflicts. Rwanda, in just 100 days from April to July 1994, between 500,000 and 1 million Rwandans, predominantly Tutsis, were massacred when a Hutu extremist-led government launched a plan to wipe out the country's entire Tutsi minority. Sudan, and that's been going on for years and years, and that's actually when we came around into the picture, when we realized, when Darfur was in a very horrible situation. Syria, since its outbreak in April 2011, the conflict in Syria has already cost well over 100,000 lives, displaced millions, and involved numerous atrocities and crimes against humanity. And today, in the 21st century, architects of evil and genocide continue to practice their despicable acts. In the Darfur region, it's still going on, of the Sudan and in the new country of South Sudan. Crimes against humanity that many, many people feel should be called as genocide today are happening to the Rohingyas in Myanmar, the Uyghurs in China, and the people of Tigray, Ethiopia. And most recently, right now, the issue of the Ukraine people, what's happening to them. Before I continue, I'd like to take a look with you at the differences between genocide and crimes against humanity. What exactly is genocide? It's a crime without a name that did not exist before 1944. In 1944, Raphael Lemkin, a Polish Jewish lawyer, sought to describe Nazi policies of systemic murder, including the destruction of the European Jews. He formed the word genocide by combining geno from the Greek word for race or tribe with side from the Latin word for killing. In 1948, the United Nations approved the Convention on the Prevention of and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. Genocide is defined as committing any of the 5 acts with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. The 5 acts are killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting conditions of life calculated to bring about the group's physical destruction, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. In addition to genocide, the tribunal is authorized to punish conspiracy to commit genocide, direct and public incitement to commit genocide, attempted genocide, and complicity in genocide. While the specific intent to destroy particular groups is unique in genocide, a closely related category of international law is crimes against humanity, defined as a widespread of systematic attacks against civilians, such as murder, extermination, enslavement, deportation, imprisonment, torture, rape, persecutions on political, racial, and religious grounds, other inhumane acts. Even though more is being done today, perpetrators of genocide and crimes against humanity continue to practice their despicable trade of evil and mass atrocities, and the world and our heads of state still today continue to act with complacency and with talk, too passively and too late. We must remember these perpetrators thrive not only on hate, but on the indifference of the world. Elie Wiesel, a very well-known Holocaust survivor and author of Night, once said, referring to victims of genocide, "Let us remember, what hurts the victim most is not the cruelty of the oppressor, but the silence of the bystander." When genocide and crimes against humanity occurs anywhere, it victimizes people everywhere. We all suffer when the perpetrators of these crimes attempt to rob the world of a culture or a people who enrich it. Sorry. And when genocide and crimes against humanity occurs anywhere, it is the responsibility of each and every one of us to become aware of man's inhumanity towards man and take immediate action to help those being affected by these monsters. In 2005, at the United Nations World Summit, member of organizations agreed to a doctrine called the responsibility to protect, which states that when a government is unable or unwilling to protect its civilians from mass atrocities, the international community must take that responsibility. This doctrine commits us all, you and me, all individuals and nations, to do our part to fulfill that responsibility. In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. A quote from Dr. Martin Luther King, a man who believed in nonviolence, a man who spoke about injustices worldwide, a man who did not preach about one tribe, one ethnic group, one race, or one color, but a man who spoke for the whole human race. When individuals know and care about what is happening in our world today, they will and can take action that will help those who are suffering from genocide and crimes against humanity. It can be stopped if the international community, along with the government, chooses to act. So why did we create this organization? The coalition was established in response to the desperate need to make people less complacent, more aware, and what actions they could take to help stop genocide and crimes against humanity. We know that perpetrators learn that if there is no action, it gives them the right to continue their actions, and they can get away with what they have been doing. Through the many years of working with COAG, I have been constantly asked, why should we care about people who live so far away from us when we have our own problems right here? My answer has always been, we are our brothers and sisters' keepers, no matter where they live in this world. How can we turn our backs on racism, anti-Semitism, people who are being annihilated, raped, taken into slavery, and displaced? Have we stopped? Have we stopped what is going on in this world as of today? Not really, but at least we can say more and more people are aware and are doing something. We have built a groundswell of people who are speaking out today. People who are people who are suffering at least know someone cares and someone is trying to put a stop to what is happening to them. This is a far cry from the World War II and what was happening during the Holocaust. When I feel the frustration, and believe me, I have felt it many, many times, of not stopping what is happening because it's been going on and on. I remember a quote from one of our books called Pirkei Avos, which translates to Ethics of Our Fathers. And this really helps me because if you're trying to do everything at once, it's not going to happen. And what the quote says, it is not up to you to finish the task, but you are not free to avoid it. And so we continue on with hope, always hope, that we will make a difference. Our mission and goals. Our mission is to educate, motivate, and empower individuals and communities to oppose genocide and crimes against humanity. We're a nonprofit, non-sectarian, non-partisan, volunteer-driven organization. Success for us would constitute awareness on the part of all people of where genocides and crimes against humanity persists, and channeling that awareness into meaningful action. Our goals are to empower people by providing them with information, tools, and activities so that they can be part of stopping genocides and crimes against humanity. Influence all media to expand its coverage of genocides and crimes against humanity around the world. And of course, when we started this organization, we just had the newspapers, TV, and radio. We didn't have the social media that we have today. And the last thing, that's not last, but it's very, very important, to work with political leaders and public officials to initiate and implement policies that will stop these horrendous crimes by putting pressure on governments that are committing or allowing genocide and crimes against humanity to happen. Our journey we began this organization in May of 2006 with a conference on genocide and crimes against humanity. And we had that conference because we wanted to see if we were needed in this community in Colorado. And after we saw 200 people come into the doors, we were convinced that we were really, really needed. So in 2007, we had our very first board meeting. And in 2008, we received our 501c3. We don't know which is our anniversary because these three things happen: our conference, and then our actual starting the organization, and then receiving our 501c3. We felt that we needed a visual tool to educate people. And so we created the Dead Weight of Complacency, a 21-panel photographic exhibit that portrays a series of genocides that mark the destructive nature of mankind. And we have two types. One, we have taken to many, all over whenever we speak. And the other is more of a museum type where you don't want to take it down too fast. Our next step was to put an organization in place. And so we formed an honorary board today chaired by former Governor Ritter, a very diversified board of directors, an advisory council, which we just started, whose purpose is to provide support, advice, and expertise to the board. We contacted many organizations who would support and help. Did I go off?
No, you're fine.
Okay, because you guys are gone. I don't see you. Let me just, let me just.
You're looking good. Continue on.
Okay, just want to get you back. There you go. Okay, so the other thing, so we also contacted many organizations at the very beginning who would support and help us reach our goal. And today we have over 40 coalition partners who are doing that, working with us. Through the years, the coalition established a strong presence in Colorado with key recognition from our congressional delegation, whose staff members we meet with on a quarterly basis, the Office of Past and Present Governors of Colorado, who have signed proclamations proclaiming April as Genocide Awareness and Prevention Month, and key organizations in Washington, D.C. dealing with genocide issues in the fight for awareness of and action. We were honored, actually, when the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in D.C. highlighted one of our projects, which was called our Ride Against Genocide. And it was highlighted on their website and kept up there for a very long time. This Ride Against Genocide took place in the summer of 2010, and it was a 4-day ride. We were looking for a bus, but didn't have money for a bus. So we took a 15-passenger car and went on a 4-day ride that covered 1,500 miles across the state of Colorado, which gave us the opportunity to take our issue to the people of 14 cities through meeting with citizens, city officials, and the press. It was mostly we had press conferences in the majority of those cities. We have organized press conferences, spoken at rallies and in schools, universities, churches, at conferences and organizations. And with the formation of our Speakers Bureau, consisting of survivors of many of these genocides and crimes against humanity, and experts on the subject, we have been able to bring dynamic speakers with us. For many years, we sponsored Taking a Stand. This was our own program, Youth Against Genocide. It was actually a Youth Against Genocide conference, which our first conference drew 200 young people. And we were planning to reinstitute that. It was very successful. When we began COAG, I was asked by the African American community if slavery was considered a genocide, at which time I had to say no, since the intent was not to kill a group of people, but to bring them here to work. My answer bothered me for many, many years, and I did make a promise that someday we would explore this. And as a result, in 2018, we convened our first conference on slavery and genocide, differences and similarities, followed by commemorating 400 years of slavery at the Denver Film Festival that was done the following year, and a panel discussing the issue. And just this past, we hosted another webinar just last year. We also have been working with our American Indian community, whose people were massacred, another crime against humanity, which should be proclaimed a genocide, and I don't believe it has been yet. Historians estimate that there were 10 million American Indians living in the US, and by 1900, their estimated population was 300,000. In the 19th century, 4,000 Cherokee people died on the Trail of Tears. Many years prior to 2020, we kept talking about the need to have Holocaust and genocide taught in public schools, and we were told it would never happen. COAG kept talking and pushing, but it took a dedicated group of legislators and a village of many individuals and organizations to finally realize that dream. The Holocaust and Genocide Education in Public Schools legislation was signed into law by Governor Polis in July of 2020, followed with a committee to work on implementing this legislation into Colorado schools. And I believe that's going to be happening next year. They're still working on it. We believe strongly with Nelson Mandela's quote, which says, and this is really a good quote, "Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world." And that's really, really an important quote. When COVID struck, we continued our work through the internet with virtual discussion series and webinars. And what is our future? We will continue to do what we've been doing, and we will strengthen our board and committees. We'll create new and better programs, such as our sermon weekend. And that weekend, we went to the faith-based community, and we had the partners. We had 4 partners: the Jewish community, the Muslim community, Colorado Council of Churches, and the Archbishop, who co-partnered with that. And what we did was to have every minister, imam, rabbi, everyone talk on that particular weekend, which was this year, it was at the end of March. And they were to talk about this issue from their pulpits. We will, and we do have another program we're looking at, which will be expanding. We had the Stop Genocide tour. We're looking now at doing a heritage tour, which I can explain a little bit later. We'll continue working with other organizations such as the United States Holocaust Museum, Enough Project, Genocide Watch, and World Without Genocide. There are many organizations out there that we really want to partner with on this national level. So what can you do and must you do to help? We now know that indifference and ignorance about genocide and crimes against humanity can kill. A little knowledge and concern that produces some action can actually save hundreds and thousands and even millions of lives. Following the genocide in Rwanda, Senator Paul Simon said, if every member of the House and Senate had received 100 letters from people back home saying we have to do something about Rwanda, then I think the response would have been different. So the several things that we push when we talk about what can you do: stay informed and inform everybody you know. Contact the media, TV, radio, newspaper, journalists, obviously get on social media. communicate with all segments of government, all segments, from the White House down. Write personal letters to your US congressional people and urge them to take action. And when we have met with our congressional delegation, one of the congressmen mentioned to us it was a little while back, said to us that one letter is worth many, many emails or telephone calls. And he felt that it made a lot of impact just writing these letters to them. But in any form is the way to go. And I must tell you that my background, I worked for 8 years with Congresswoman Pat Schroeder, and I saw this happen. I saw where, and I was very involved with other congressional offices, when people call, when people write, people put them in their work, in their office. And if they don't do what their constituents want, they could be in big trouble. And that's what we're trying to do. Get them to really push. Set up appointments. Go see them in person. We're going to be doing that in August. We hope to we've been working with staff in the local offices because they too need to be educated. But this summer in August, we will be scheduling meetings with all of our US delegation. So in closing, and I do want to be a little on the upbeat, we need to strengthen our commitment to alleviate anguish and foster dignity for all human beings so that someday in the very near future, never again will truly mean never again, and all humanity will be able to live in a peaceful world. And when you feel that we have not been able to move this world, as many times I feel, we must always remember it's not up to us to finish the task, but we cannot avoid it. Let us all strengthen so I thank you for listening, and thank you.
Ross, can you take some questions?
I hope I could answer them. Yes, I'd love to talk about peace and get some answers and get their perspective of what their perspective of peace is.
I've got about 20. How many, who would like to go first? Bob Maroney from Fort Collins.
Could you speak a bit about the impact of cultural genocide? Did you catch that?
Can you explain a little bit more?
Well, the US and many other, Canada and many other groups have said, oh no, we don't want to kill everybody, but this culture of these people is an evil culture. It is divisive, it's bad, it's not as good as some other faith. So let's take away the language of the people, punish them if they use their own language, take away their children and put them in schools where we could re-educate them. They will know a new heritage, etc. So it seems to me that I think you would find a lot of people today who would be aghast at the suggestion that they want to kill somebody, but they wouldn't seem to be very unhappy at all about re-educating incorrect and fallacious ideas.
It's another form. As far as I'm concerned, it's another form of crimes against humanity, would you not say?
Yes, the Uyghur situation in China is a good example.
Right, exactly. And there are many examples. Right, right.
During the 1900s and 1920s and 30s in the United States and Canada, huge numbers of Native American children were taken away from their families and placed in schools where they were retrained, punished if they spoke their native languages.
Right.
The same thing happened in the South. African Americans were punished if they spoke their original native languages, if they tried to follow their faiths, whatever form it was, from their native land.
And I believe the Native Americans as well. Many children were taken away and put in schools so that they would be taken away and learn differently, the right way. And that, so it's another form of crimes against humanity and has to be
So is
addressed
critical
as
race
well.
theory another form of genocide? The removal of
Well, the thing that really, the thing that that I personally, and I think many people are dealing with, is the word genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes. My problem, what I deal with is, when does something become genocide? So many of these things, so many of these atrocities have been called crimes against humanity, but it has not flipped over to genocide. And many people that are working in this area have been talking about, there's so many different, I mean, look at Ukraine. It was called a genocide, but then you have people saying, no, it is not a genocide. They have to go through, it has to be documented. It has to go through tribunal. It has to go through courts. So that by the time you get through, it could be years.
According to the Russians, it's not a war. It's a military intervention on the behalf of the Eastern Ukrainians. So there's, again, it's this using language to divert attention and to distort perception.
Right, I just wanted to make a note here. Just 1 second, I'm sorry.
Well, to the side, I'd like to mention that I am personally extremely embarrassed by the US position of refusing to cooperate in the international court or to support many other ways that internationally we could bring people to, or countries to punish them and hence give them a reason not to commit these war crimes and genocide.
Well, look at what the Americans have. I mean, the United States has done so many pretty bad things, and all of this would probably come out in the courts. Correct?
That's
It's probably why they don't want to be part of it.
right, and a major issue. Very few people are aware of the atrocities our government has performed. We've overturned 38 governments since World War II. It goes on. Yes, there's a lot that we would not want out.
Well, the Native American, I'm sorry, Native Americans, I mean, are such an example of, I mean, well, there's so many examples, but you go back to and people don't really, I think the education of these people, it's not fully there. People don't really realize what has happened. And yet, when I spoke last year to another group, young kids, they were asked me, was Native American, is it considered what happened to them a genocide? We can't, it was never really proclaimed genocide.
I'm finding it interesting how much we're in our news is what the Canadians did with Indigenous. I lived in Phoenix for many years and visited recently the Heard Museum. The Heard Museum is one of the best Indian museums in the country. The wife and I walked out of the section where it showed about the Indian schools. We were absolutely in tears. They pull no punches. The Indians tell the story, and it is just pretty hard to imagine. In the small ways, I enjoyed you talking about the tools. One of the things that we all ask, well, gee, what is it we can do? You know, in communication and in just in talking with one another, I know that we all live in groups, and when you're in groups, there's always out groups. And the truth is, we fear being part of the in-group more than we fear the out-group. That our need to belong sometimes interferes with our ability to stand up and say, enough. Sometimes we become intimidated in our own groups to say, I don't agree with that. And so how do we develop that courage within the individual when they see it's wrong, when they hear it's wrong, but yet our need to be liked by our in-group becomes more important than standing up for the direction?
I feel that, but I feel very strongly that the more we talk, and I think that you can't just be giving a lot of statistics and history, what history lessons usually are. You got to open up hearts. You've got to make people really, really feel like they're in the shoes of these people suffering and going through what they're going through. I think that if hearts are open and people start reading stories about people that are going through all of this, they will then get the courage to say, go opposite of everyone else. And I don't want to bring it back to me, but when you were talking about that, the courage, I don't know how I was so shy when I was a little kid, and we were living in Newport News, Virginia. My father's went from New Jersey to Virginia. We were the home that we moved to was owned by the synagogue. And prior to our coming there, some family sold to an African-American family. And you can imagine what happened. Boom, out. We were the only white family. Everyone moved out. And I remember vividly, and in fact, I found a picture of this. I kept this picture of my 7th grade class. The teacher getting up in front of the entire class and saying, Rosalind, is it true that you live in a block full of, I can't even say the word. And I said, yes, ma'am. And what is wrong with that? And I think that I learned, what I feel strongly about is that I heard so much in my home, for other people and respecting other people and living peacefully with other people. I think when you have these values or these feelings, you will become part of not sitting and being with that group that doesn't do anything. You will be part of a group that does stand up. Did I answer that question?
Very well, yes.
We have, that's part of our work, is building, making people really feel deeply and then become strong.
Could it be we spend so much energy hiding from our ills, particularly now when we look at, if I may, the GOP, which is taking books off the shelf that talks about gay, genocide, slavery, taking books off the shelves that have any of the negative on the US. I would rather see us address the issues, look at them, and then talk about, I love your statement, never again, because it became yet again. And it's going to continue until we begin to look at it and look at how we address it.
Right. Well, when we began, we were working mainly with in African countries in across the ocean, not here. And when all these mass killings, when it became more and more and more, I had a board member who sent me a note saying, enough with the thoughts and prayers. We have got to do something about this. And we had, every year we would have breakfast, bringing our supporters together, bringing new people to learn more about us. And I got up and I basically said, we've got crimes against humanity right here in our own backyard. What's going on, the mass killings here. And that really was started because of the George Floyd situation and what was going on with the African Americans. And the thing that really worries me so, and our work, because what we did was to do a lot of these conferences I talked about. We were working more within our own country, what was going on, and realized that history it's not totally right. I have a board member who says to me, we need to get rid of the books. We gotta get or change them or something, because we're not teaching what needs to be taught about the African American community,
About truth.
Native American community. And when you look at Tulsa, Tom Hanks did an article, I think it was the New York Times, where he said, I didn't know about Tulsa. What happened in Tulsa with the Black community that was totally destroyed. How can we not know about this?
Yeah.
A few generations back, there were other ethnic groups that were being attacked. In the 1890s, there was an episode in Louisiana where a mob attacked and killed a very large number of Italian Americans. The concern was that these people were Catholic, that they would then support the Pope over the US president, that they were taking away American jobs, that they weren't right culturally, they celebrated the wrong holidays. And in fact, many people don't realize it, but Columbus Day came out of that massacre partly when President Harrison tried to somehow give reparation to the Italian American community and say, well, let's recognize our Italian citizens and establish Columbus Day. Of course, we've just gone through the major confrontation about, well, the Columbus was a person who incited genocide of American Indians. Therefore, we shouldn't celebrate him. But I wonder how many people understand why that day was originally established.
I mean, not. There's so much lack of education, really. To give another example we're on the Native Americans. Of course, I never know what to call. We're always taught people change their way of being addressed. I'm understanding that now it's American Indians. I don't know. I'm always very, it changes from day to day.
Indigenous.
So,
Right. Well, we were in a school. We were talking in a school, and we were getting a lot of call. I mean, COVID really just, we have not been able to get out to schools in the last couple of years, although we've done a lot of webinars and things like that. But we were in a school, and a teacher, the person who was speaking, I was with someone else from the Native American community, and she asked the students, she said, do you know what Redskins are? What does that mean? What does Redskins mean? That's the mascot, right?
The football team.
Yeah. Not one person knew, not one. And she described it about the scalping and the blood running down. And of course, how, that was at the time when there was the beginning discussions of changing the names so that we don't have those names in front of us, those bad names. And it took a while. We finally got that law finally passed this past year. I think it was this year.
we're running short on time. Peter, I know you have some great thoughts. Would you like to add something before we leave?
Well, unfortunately, I find this discussion very depressing. Having been around for a long time and having lived in many of those places that have experienced those problems, and seeing what's happening in our own country, and where, we were saying earlier that education is an essential component of maybe turning things around. But in this country, we are not very open to education. Some states outright, some school districts outlaw certain topics altogether. And then we have some press components in this country who basically say that when we talk about Ukraine, that it's all a lie, and really it's Russia's right to do what they're doing. And, a lot of people listen to this kind of stuff. And so I'm depressed. It's depressing to me.
It's a challenge.
It's a very hard, depressing subject, and I'm on it and at it every day. It seems like every day, but let me give you an example of a little positive. When we did our very first conference, when over 200 people came in, there were people from Sudan, and there was one man from the Dinka tribe. They're very tall people. He came over to me and he bent down, and I've never met him in my life. He bent down and he hugged me, and he kept saying, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." That's what keeps us going, keeps our organization going. That we know that we're, as depressing as it is, because you look around and you say, "My God, look, it never goes away." I mean, I can name 20 other things that are happening that can make it here in our own country. But the fact that if you keep doing and working to make a change, it makes you feel better. At least you feel you're doing something. And just getting other people to join us. I mean, I hate when I see people, I don't, we were protesting one year downtown, and told them what we're doing. "Oh, I'm sorry," and they walked away. That's even more depressing, the fact that they're not even willing to listen to what's happening. And but if we work at it, we do something about it and not stop. Even though I started my conversation with, I don't think we'll see peace in my lifetime, but that doesn't mean that there won't be peace in my children or my grandchildren, or now I have 5 great-grandchildren in their lifetime. So that's the up.
At 45, how can you do that?
45, yeah, I wish.
I see peace as like raindrops on water, that you have a drop hit the surface and out from it ripples a series of rains. And that may be the impact of standing up and saying something like you're doing. And these move out, and initially the waves are big, and yeah, they eventually die away. But if there's another raindrop somewhere else, it sends out another set of ripples, and another one somewhere else, it sends up another set of ripples. Pretty soon, everybody has been in a wave. Let's put it that way. They've had some kind of impact.
I give you 2 examples. One, my favorite song, and I should have mentioned it, Barry Manilow's "One Voice." One voice, and then more and more and more. And then just today I got in the mail, of course, a fundraising letter to support an organization. I can't remember the exact wording, but it was by Mrs. Lyndon Johnson. It takes 1,000 steps to get to peace, but one step at a time will get you there. It's not quite the quote, but it's all this. This is the positive. So I want to leave everybody with a real positive note that there are little changes, and we do see some positive things happening. It's not all bad, and we just all have to get involved and do something, and make sure we all work at it.
I want to honor the time, but Carol, Vicente, and Greg, do you have anything else that you would like to offer?
What I want to just say is this reminds me of the women's vote. It took over 100 years for the women to get the vote, and they didn't stop. And some of the early ones didn't live to see it. It's just like a little comparison. They didn't give up.
Well, you know what? Excuse me, Jim. You know what? We did a conference, and I had a wonderful woman working with us, a student. And she said, "I got to do it. We're going to do a video to launch this youth conference." And what she did was to look at the different groups and the movements of the different groups, of the Chicano group, of the women, as you just said, of the the African American, I mean, all these different movements that did make change. And on a personal level, I worked very closely with the Soviet Jewry movement. My father was in Russia to see what was happening to the Jews of silence there after Stalin died. And that's why we're in Denver, because he came to speak to a synagogue. And we worked and worked and worked. And we had people in prison, and one of the guys was supposed to be killed. And nationwide, there was a nationwide protest. There were people in many states were standing weeks on Capitol's grounds. And you know that man today is alive. He's alive. We did it. We all did it. And all those people got out of Russia. So there's some very good success stories.
Well, with no other questions, wow, Ross, I do thank you. I do thank you for bringing that awareness, for instilling into our hearts the need to communicate, sharing with the tools, sharing your passion, sharing your knowledge. I thank you. I thank you.
And if any of you are interested in joining us, please do. We have some really exciting things planned we're looking at doing this year.
And if we wanted to join you, we would contact you, or?
You could, by the way, we are not remarketing, but yes, we're changing, we're trying to do some new things with our marketing pieces. And just get to our website. And you'll find how you can get in touch with us.
Okay. And the website is the Coalition Against Global Genocide.
KOCOAGG. Right. And my name is there, phone number, so that you can just be in touch with me directly. I'd love to talk to any one of you. And I appreciate you listening. And I hope I didn't depress you too much.
No.
Thank you, Roz.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. And if anybody needs contact information, I certainly have lots of it. And Roz, I hope that we will be spending more time together.
Would love to. Love it. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you all.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
We are taking the next month off, and then we will be back again in September with some more exciting and always educational and inspiring. And again, Roz, a final thank you. And with that, we will bid adieu.